Welcome back to another episode of the True Grit Podcast, and I'm back with Paige, and we are living together in Pisac in Peru. So, honestly, don't really know what we're going to talk about today, but we've been having these extremely juicy conversations pretty much every day. So we were in the middle of one, and as has happened before, we're like, we should record this. So, do you want to talk about basically what we were just talking about codependence and compassion? Yes. Because I feel like this is kind of a new topic for me. Well, actually, yeah, I'll just let you go into it because for me, the codependence word, as you know, has always struck a nerve with me. I don't love it. But after reading literally his Instagram post yesterday, I was like, okay, maybe I changed my mind. Maybe I didn't like it because I've been in so many fucking codependent relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, there is this thing where, you use a word and you cling to it and it becomes your identity. And it's like you don't have to attach yourself to, people come and they say, oh, I'm very codependent. And it becomes part of who they associate themselves as. But I was going to say, well, let me read a couple of the slides. So Jack Cornfield, who's this amazing, Buddhist teacher, basically, just recently posted this about codependence. Codependence means being an accomplice, a kind of complicity with someone who's acting in a self-destructive way and being dependent on their behavior or supporting it in somehow for your own security. Codependence sometimes cloaks itself as compassion. And then I'll read this last one. In codependence, we often find ourselves consistently trying to fix or save someone instead of allowing them to taste the fruits of their karmas.
Oof.
Yeah.
I loved that piece because it was literally just what we were talking about yesterday, where it's we've seen patterns of ourselves, especially with men, seeing them and seeing the good in them and just going with that instead of letting them, as he says, taste the fruits of their own karma. I was like, oh, that is good.
Yeah, and I think you and I are both kind of trying to put this into practice because, earlier I was saying, I actually find I really love the word codependence because I, for so many years, would go in and out of all of these relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, and just basically my family of origin, a lot of my relationships there, which I know you can relate to, that all of these relationships had very, very, very similar dynamics, which was if they were in the room, I'd have to kind of shrink myself a little bit or do everything I could to make a situation back at ease or make everybody feel comfortable or just forgive them for stuff they didn't necessarily need to be forgiven for and not speak about it and kind of just devalue myself so that the other person was good. And if the other person wasn't good, then I wasn't good. And I lived most of my life like that. And it wasn't until I was in therapy in my very late 20s, first therapist in my true adult life, that she started talking about codependent relationships. And when that word came into my life, it did make me breathe a sigh of relief because I went through life not understanding these dynamics pretty much at all. I didn't understand it was people pleasing in a way. I knew they were not healthy, but I didn't really understand why. What was I doing wrong or what were they doing wrong? I didn't totally get the whole concept behind it. And then understanding codependency was a big step in acknowledging my part in these relationships, their part in these relationships, and now what was required to make a shift to transmute into a healthier dynamic, which is boundaries.
Yeah, God, we're gonna be talking about this till we die. Yeah. Amen. I mean, I think the reason, there's a lot of reasons that I was had an aversion to this word. You already said one of them, which is I don't love when people can just label themselves as something and use that as a victim mentality. But I think even as you were explaining that today and I was reading about it last night, I was like, oh, this is also, it feels very related to how I'm sometimes anxious attached in a relationship, and that gives me some feelings of shame because it's I feel for some reason in my head, and maybe it's like chick flicks, but it's like,
Probably.
it's like avoidant is cool and anxious is like clingy and weird and not cool.
Yeah.
Like that's what I've always had in my head. And I think like with a lot of things I can be kind of avoidant, but mostly, and thanks to my parents, like I feel like I could say I'm pretty securely attached if we're talking about like attachment terms and labels and stuff. But like if I get in a relationship with someone who's emotionally unavailable or blah, 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 like I can definitely become anxious in my attachment. And I'm like, that's, I don't know. It's another layer of myself that I'm starting to unpeel where I'm like, oh, that exists and existed. And it's something that I feel shame about. Like, I'm not like, oh, that's not a part of me that's so easily lovable. It's just like, that's a little bit like, ooh, why are you so clingy? And when I was listening to this stuff about the codependence, I'm like, that's totally it. It's a couple things. I'm trying to control their perception of me, but I'm also trying to like really help them. And I'm kind of trying to go around like protecting them from everything and just being like, no, it's okay. Don't look over there. Like, don't move this way. And trying to micromanage like their entire experience, which is just such a fucking waste of energy.
It's such a waste of energy. It is. It's a fool's errand. But also, I think with that ancient attachment style, ultimately, it's like there's such a deep vulnerability there, right? It's like that anxious attachment style comes from ultimately the fear of rejection and abandonment. Mm-hmm. And it's like all we are these little kids running around like wanting everybody to love us and accept like our deepest parts and everything. So like, of course, if the person leans more avoidant, or honestly, even if they're secure and you're not used to being with a secure partner, they're going to pick at certain parts of your insecurities. You know, if a secure partner, like for a situational example, you're at a party together or a small gathering, and your secure partner goes over and talks to, another female, and everybody's friends there, and if you were secure in that relationship, you probably wouldn't think twice. You'd probably be glad. Oh, that's a friend of mine too. Okay, I'm gonna go chit chat with this guy, and then I'll go over there and see what they're talking about or whatever. But if you're anxious, your like subconscious is going to start to spin out the story of rejection. Yep. Oh, that he's actually not interested in you, and he was just waiting to get to this party to talk to that girl, and so then it's making you feel completely uneasy in your body and everything, and it's like all of these red flags are going up, and all of a sudden you lose the plot. Yes. And it really has basically nothing to do with the secure partner. It has to do with your insecurity, which I recently started to love that word because I love etymology and pulling these words apart, because I was recently told, like, you can be insecure or you can be insecurity. Isn't that great? Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And all that, I mean, there's so many things I want to talk about right now, so I'm like,
I know, same.
Okay, so, because I kind of want to touch on what we talked about last night also, which is in this, like, I've never felt more empowered in my fucking life, and a lot of that has to do with, like, our conversation last night, and just peeling off these layers of insecurity or whatever we want to call it, but it's like, when I hear you saying those things, I'm like, oh, yes, depending on my partnership, I've definitely experienced feelings of jealousy, but I've also experienced the other thing where if I'm feeling really secure, I really don't care if they're talking to another woman. Right. I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me. So I've experienced all the ends of the spectrum. But for this, it's like what I'm realizing is the fear of rejection. I'm thinking about what that man said to me on the sailboat where he was like, you're afraid of rejection or whatever. And, like, that pissed me off for a variety of reasons. One, because I was like, oh, are you rejecting me? Like, I didn't realize that was what's happening. But if you are, like, I literally don't I don't care. Yeah. Right. Because I don't like you as a human being. I don't respect you. But anyway, I was like, you know what? Maybe in the past I have been terrified. I do have this, like, fear of rejection and abandonment, which is confusing. Don't really know where it comes from, but it's fucking there. So it's like, okay, I've worked with accepting that, like, loving that part of myself. And I'm finally starting to get a taste of what it will feel like to really not care if I'm rejected by anyone. And that is, like, huge, because I think I've felt like that for a while in my life where, again, peeling off these layers, but it's like, I don't really care about, what my teachers might think about me or this and that. And then it gets more and more intense, but I think the last layer is, like, men. We just talked about this last night, but it's like, I didn't realize how much stock I was putting into how men perceive me. And it's like so subtle at this point. But it's totally there. So if I can get to that spot where, and I feel like I'm very close to that, where I like truly don't care if I'm rejected as long as I'm being authentic and true to myself, then like, hell yeah.
Well, because I think that's like the biggest part of it, right? It's like, okay, so the other person or the job or the situation or the roommate or whatever it is, it's like that's always going to only be like one half, and you can't put all the blame on the external. So then the other half is you. And it's like that, like all of these kind of insecurities that are then manifesting themselves as these relational dynamic issues, it's like those are all energy leaks. And so how do you plug up those energy leaks? It's like you have to turn your focus inward and really ask, like, okay, so what lets me feel like I'm in my own personal power? What lets me feel like I am in security, in my body, in safety? And I think like a lot of our conversations, it kind of goes back to like, you have to figure out where you're going to take, if you're going to plug up those energy leaks, now you have this abundance of energy, and you can't do nothing with it because just the laws of the universe, it has to go somewhere. It can't be, created or destroyed. So what are you going to do with that energy? And you can use it to build your confidence, to basically create a completely new self-concept of like who you are, in your own eyes, which will then eventually be mirrored in the eyes of others, in the eyes of your relationship and that kind of thing. But I think a lot of that starts with putting that energy into creativity.
Yes. Yeah, and that's so huge because, okay, when you're talking, it reminded me of how one of my like first spiritual teachers, Terry Hawkins, that woman I was like an au pair for, she told me that the universe doesn't speak in no's or like negative language. So if you say, I don't want this to happen, it's going to happen. Or like, I don't want to trip and fall. Yes. You're going to trip and fall. So it's like, so this is something I've always kind of known. But when you were talking, I was like, you know what I was doing for the last, decade of my life? I was like, I don't want to focus on boys. Like, I don't want to focus on men. I don't want to focus on relationships. Don't think about a white elephant. So it's like, I was just telling Paige this, but I'll tell the podcast. Like, I feel so single, and it's so beautiful because in my whole life, I've had single periods. But this is the first time where I'm like not talking to anybody, not thinking anyone. As you said, there's no energy leaks, and I'm not trying to convince myself not to think of men. I'm just like filling up this space with other things. So I'm using this energy, this life force to like, oh, what do I want to build in this world? What do I want to put out? Like, what do I actually want to do for a job? Like, the concept that we have to just do jobs to make money is insane. Like, literally crazy. So the fact that we can just like take some time and sit back and be like, okay, what do I want to do? Doesn't matter if it makes money or not, but like, what do I want to do with my time?
But that thought is like, that's a very creative thought, because I think the idea is that like if we use that creative force, we can create our life from scratch, and we can decide how much money we make, how we make that money, who our relationships are, who our friends are, where we live, like all of that stuff. Ultimately, like, just to have the mindset of like, I'm co-creating this life, where I think a lot of people, unfortunately, it's like they get stuck in all the responsibilities that they have back home, and they get into a job, and so they're sitting at a desk, and they don't even realize like they have the opportunity to ask themselves, how do they want to make money? And like, especially in this day and age, there's a million different ways to like use your creativity to just decide how you're going to support yourself in this world, or live somewhere where it's just not that crazy expensive and you can live within your means. I mean, there's like always options, there's always resources, there's always, everything's figure outable, but it ultimately starts with that grain of like deciding that you have the power to create it. And like make a vision and see it through. And
seeing where your energy is leaking. I know I've been talking about energy leakage so much lately, but it's been like such a crazy life-altering concept for me, because even just taking a look at my life and seeing where I am leaking energy, it's like all over the place.
Yeah.
Like I'm basically like a balloon that has like a billion holes because it's like, oh, I'm thinking about this person and this person and this person, and like that is energy. That is life force, and that's all going out of me. Like, so when I plug up those holes and only focus on me, it's like, wow, I have so much energy, and I have like all this like literally life force passion about like what I can fill my days with that I actually want to do. But I understand I'm speaking from a place of privilege here too. It's like I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I don't have a partner. Like these are things that would take up so much time and energy, and like we just don't have that.
Yes. But it is more so of like a basic concept. So I recently did a cockatoo with a friend and teacher of ours who lives here in PSAC, and she's like the coca lady. I mean, she's incredible, and her relationship with coca is so beautiful. So basically the way a cockatoo works is, you kind of sit with the plant, you chew your leaves, and she basically operates as a channel of coca, and talks to you through, whatever problem or question you have for the reading. And it's like a form of divination. But anyways, one of the things that came last week from the cockatoo that I did was this concept of choice, right? And you always have a million choices of how you want to live your day. And I'm talking about like the little subtle choices, thoughts even, like choosing thoughts. But that it's, she kind of had me as this eagle, right? And if we think about an eagle, and we think about an eagle, in a tree or up in the nest, and it's looking for prey. So it chooses with its eagle eye where the prey is going to go. And then once it takes flight, it just hops on these air vectors, or these, vectors of wind, and doesn't actually expel a lot of its own energy. It's just kind of riding on this momentum. But the initial point of choice is what matters. After that point of choice, the taking flight and the riding on the vectors actually doesn't take a lot of energy, but you are carried away.
Yes.
Kind of like, the concept was just like taking something and running with it. So yeah, so we're just given those opportunities and those choices all day long, and they can lead to a lot of energy leaks, and it can be really, really simple stuff. And then we don't realize why we're exhausted or why we're so tired. And it's just that we've, been on our phone all afternoon, or like continually talk to somebody who's like very, very draining for us. And we didn't put up any kind of boundary on that at all. And these different small things. And so it's like the more we become aware of, oh, wow, that really did take a lot of my energy. That really did exhaust me. Like, there's people in this world who are drains, there's people in this world who are taps, and like you kind of have to start like looking in the world that way, of like everything that you're doing is either a drain or it's a tap.
Yes. And it's okay too. It's like if I'm talking to someone who is maybe draining my energy, it's like be conscious about that, because I think in the past I've really just gotten carried away in those vectors, gotten carried away with the wind, where it's like, oh, and now I'm in this conversation, and now this person's calling me, and now I'm texting this person, and now I'm listening to audio messages, without actually pausing and being like, do I have the emotional capacity right now to handle this? And so I've gotten a lot better at that recently, of being like, okay, I'm resourcing myself, like finding my own strength and filling my own cup up first before I consciously enter this energy exchange with someone else. But it's like that was such a blind spot for me for so long, was just getting carried away by the winds of life, and then being like, oh, I didn't have time for this. But another helpful reframe for that was like, I didn't prioritize this. It's like, if you don't have time for something, it's because you're not prioritizing it.
Yeah.
It's like, that's just a simple switch. It's shifting from the victim mentality of like, my life's happening to me, versus like, I'm choosing, and it goes back to the boundaries thing. It always goes back to the boundaries.
It does. And most of the time, we actually do have time. But it's like, again, how closely are you looking at what is actually taking so much energy from you? And if you like removed 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there from this or that or the other thing, like you might actually have time at the end of the day.
Yes.
But yeah, this all is like a conversation that was like basically bordering on the other conversation that we were having, which stems from essentially like the patriarchy, and how much basically through history and through just like all of our lives as women, we've had this incredible abundance of energy, right? Like in Kundalini yoga, they say the female aura is like 16 times stronger and more powerful than a man's, simply because, we have our womb. And so it's like, we're not only holding our auras in our energetic field, but it's like we're holding the auras of all these generations that live in our bodies and things like that. And this idea that, back in the day, men essentially kind of sniffed that out and understood that. And so what they do is they fill us, love you men, but there's a lot of these relationship dynamics and these power dynamics that have put women basically as like the oppressed, in these relationships, the one who is constantly giving, right? And so again, in Kundalini yoga, they say like, basically, if you're having thoughts of self-doubt or self-judgment, it's like that immediately takes 30% of like all of your energy. Like it depletes your energy by like 30%. Each thought of self-doubt that you have, or giving your power away, or anything like that. And so anyways, so we had this amazing conversation the other night, just about how difficult it's been through both of our lives. And I think probably a lot of women can relate to this, but of not even totally understanding these dynamics that we have with men, and we immediately like give our power away, whether that's like our sexual power or just so much of our like emotional capacity, or like whatever we can do for these men, because I think there's a part of us that understands that they couldn't totally handle us at our full power. And so we kind of bend and shift and make excuses for that. But
definitely, I think what I'm realizing too is, and Paige and I talked about a lot about this last night, but like how deeply afraid women are of their own power, and like how that would be perceived from other women or men, because it's like the last so many years I've been working on myself. I feel like I've done a lot of work on the sister wound and my relationship with other women, and really feeling like, okay, I want to empower myself and empower other women, but I just didn't think about men yet. Like that wasn't a part of the equation in my head of like empowering myself. But when we started talking about it last night, it was like, I don't feel fully in my power around men. And a lot of that is because I don't feel comfortable being fully in my, because I, like you said, I don't think that they could handle it. And even as I'm saying that, I'm like, that's not even being fair to men either, because that's just me making an assumption that they can't handle this, so I'm not going to do it. But it's like, maybe they could. Maybe if we all brought out our potential, like everyone would rise to the occasion, but we don't know until we put it out there.
Yeah.
So it's like doing a disservice to everyone.
Yeah, and it's almost, again, it's like these can happen in really subtle ways. Like I recently had an experience where a close friend was kind of, I don't know, worried about something that I was potentially going to go and do, and I understood his worry, of course, but at the same time, I also realized part of it was like, I actually really, really, really trusted myself and trusted what I was doing and who I was doing it with and everything that I was going to venture into, and I kind of like let that trust really quiet down and let his idea of like how this event was going to shape up and all of his concerns kind of take over for a second, because I realized he wasn't almost ready to see me like fully trust myself, and I knew that, so I didn't let him see me sit in that for a second. And it was kind of I know this is like a very vague way of saying all this stuff, sorry podcast listeners, but ultimately it's like I think we do that a lot, where it's like we do know our power, but like are we ready to stand in it? Like, I mean, truly ready to stand in it, where even when we know it's going to make other people uncomfortable, we stand in it. Like that's, I think, kind of where you and I both are now, where it's getting ready to be like, yeah, eventually all of the work that we do, and all of the boundaries that we put up and all of the relationships that we've been in and everything we've been working towards and all of the shadow work, it's like, it's eventually for that reason, so that we can free ourselves to like really stand in our power and actually really understand our power. Because I think a lot of women, myself included, like don't actually understand just how powerful we are. and like the energetics of our power, and where does it live in our bodies, and where does it live in our hearts, and like what we need to be, the practices that we need to be instilling in ourselves every single day, and we need to be talking to ourselves and about ourselves and to each other, and like there's so much physicality around it and energetics around it, and like and are we ready to like own that?
Yes.
You know?
Because even as you're talking, I'm like, again, back to the universe doesn't understand negatives. It's like when we're talking about stuff like systematic oppression, right? It's like I feel like the conversation has been, not our conversation, but the societal conversation has been a lot around that, instead of like, okay, but what does it actually look like for a woman to stand in your power? Like, we've talked a lot about, okay, all the problems that are going on in the world. Like, I think most people are pretty aware of that. But it's like, but what does it actually look like to be in your power? And I'm like, there's not many, I mean, I'll take that back. There are a lot of examples of women who are standing in their power, but it's like, I haven't fully felt that in myself yet. And even as you're talking, I'm like, that's really what it is. You have to embody it for yourself to even understand what that means. And it's a lot of micro decisions. It's a lot of subtle behavioral changes. Like, even, I was telling you last night, like going out into the street and the way that I carry myself around men versus if it was just a world full of women, how would I be behaving in the world? It would look different.
Yeah.
It just would. So it's like, I want to get to the point where it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, where I'm just out in the world as me, fully in my power, and like, it doesn't matter who's around. And it even goes back to that fear of rejection, where it's like, if I don't have any fear of rejection or abandonment because I know I'm so solid in myself, then like, it truly doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, it truly doesn't. I mean, that's a very difficult, long road place to get to. But I also think part of the practice of getting there, at least like for me, is like having support from other women like you specifically. I feel like you and we work off of each other on so many different like layers and levels and these conversations and everything, and we're always kind of going through similar things and like death and rebirth cycles at the same time. And I like can't even imagine going through this without you, because you've been such a mirror and reflection of like all of this stuff, and it's like you're part of the medicine that like brings it to the surface and as it comes out. So like, I think having that sisterhood and like building it, and like, I know we've talked about this before, but like, by the way, that shit is so uncomfortable sometimes, like the most uncomfortable, but then it's also like the most crazy beautiful thing ever. But also it's kind of, I think for me, it's recognizing when the shadows are coming up and when I have to be down and when I have to sit in all that insecurity and that self-worth stuff, and like the feeling of how other people are perceiving me, or how a guy is feeling about me, or like all of that stuff. Like, when that's really hitting and coming to the surface, there's really not a whole lot you can do except for just fully be in it. But outside of that, once you're able to like kind of move through that and as you say, like suck the lessons out of it, take the lessons from it, and then like move forward, I think you also have to kind of start like faking it till you make it a little bit, because that's how you build up like behavioral patterns and like reset lifelong limiting beliefs, is like you kind of just have to like just say it. I mean, say mantras or affirmations, even if they feel silly, over and over again, or like even if it's like just the way that you walk into a room, like, and it makes you very uncomfortable to, shoulders back, head high, but okay, let's try it. Let's see how that feels. And these like little things, like you'll feel such a crazy difference. I mean, even if you just slouched like right now and like sat in like how it feels to just slouch and like make your voice a little more soft spoken, and then all of a sudden, like fully, straight spine, shoulders back, smile on your face. Like, it's such an energetic difference. And I think what I'm learning is that you kind of have to put yourself there, maybe even before you feel totally ready, because that's how you like train yourself to learn what this feels like in your body and how to hold that resonance a little bit. Yeah.
Amen. I mean, to everything you said, but it's just like, that's how I did it. I totally faked. I'm still faking it till I make it. Like, it probably will always be, because again, there's no like fully healed version of myself. There's no perfect that I'm going to get to. So it's like, okay, we're always going to be working with that. But at the same time, like accepting where you're at, owning it, and maybe even like, yeah, shooting for the stars a little bit. Like, maybe I don't feel super empowered, but I'm gonna fucking act like it. And then guess what? You kind of feel like it.
Yeah.
And then like, it's like the same thing with beauty. I think beauty is totally like, some people get so caught up in how they look and how they, it's like, well, if you just really feel like, and pretend that you're so beautiful, like, you will be.
100%.
Like 100, like that's just how it is. It's crazy.
That is so how it is. I mean, I think as women, we can always recognize in ourselves, whether we want to admit it or not, when we're, there's like a certain person around, or maybe even not, like, and you're just subconsciously fixing your hair, or you're on a Zoom, or you're kind of just always making, and you make that face that you make when you're trying to like be cute or whatever, and it's like you can recognize when you do it, and then you can immediately recognize when other women do it, and it's just like this funny thing that we're, but here's the funnier part, is that the women who genuinely are not doing that or fixing themselves, or so focused very clearly on, how they're being perceived by other people, it's like that relaxed woman, I mean, that's like a force of magnetism. Totally. And a force of radiance, because it's like, it's just kind of coming from the inside. Anyways, and that's the goal.
That is the
relaxed
goal.
Woman.
Yeah. Relaxed, just like authentic woman. And I feel like it happens with me sometimes and sometimes not, but it's like, that's okay too. It's like, if you get these moments of like kind of letting your real self shine, and you kind of feel that, it's like, just notice that, and then just start to become aware of like who you're around when you feel like that, and what you're doing, and what your thoughts are like, and what activities you do that day, because it's all just, it all adds up. But last night when Paige and I were talking about this, like, my body was literally shaking for like 30 minutes. I just couldn't understand it. I still don't exactly know what happened, but I think a lot of it was me realizing like, oh, this is a whole nother layer that's been living inside of my body, and it's not just my stuff. It is definitely also my stuff, as we talked about earlier, how I have, some anxious stuff going on, or some ancient attachments, or some codependency, or this and that. So it's definitely some of my stuff too. But it's also just like the collective, like Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body, that we have this collective women pain body that gets activated once a month right before our period. And it's like, I so deeply felt that, where I was like, okay, none of us are free until we're all free, kind of thing. It's like, what's going to help everyone is me really embodying all this shit, and like really becoming so authentic that like nothing can fuck with me. And that is what helps each other rise. Like, I will say for you too, you've immensely helped me, even just by having these conversations. It's really why I wanted to record this too, because I'm like, if people don't have someone to talk about this stuff with, that would be really tough, because you can only get so far alone, I really think. Like, I think we're like social creatures. We need to be talking through this stuff, and like bouncing ideas off each other, and being mirrors for each other, and being like, oh, okay, I'm bumping up against that too, but that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm like broken. Yeah. That doesn't mean I'm like totally at square one again. It's just like a part of this process, and we're just going to keep walking each other through it, and then moving on. And like every time we do that, it just feels like I just get a little bit stronger, like a little bit more resilient. Yeah. And just like, okay, like every time I'm back in the cocoon, in the goo, it's like I feel more and more okay with that stage, because I know that I'm just getting stronger. Yeah. And I think ultimately it's like, to be able to have these conversations, it's just an acknowledgement that even though we're going through our own separate life paths, it's like we're headed down in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because we'll go through these like, we've been working with mushrooms a lot recently, and the mushroom journey has been like a really, really interesting one. And I think one of the things we did want to talk about was the fact that, so we did a mushroom ceremony on the full moon in Virgo, which, by the way, we're both have like 4 planets in Virgo each. And we both got our period like on the full moon on mushrooms. Like, it was this crazy experience, like truly a portal, very wild. Wild. But so we've been doing this mushroom journey together, and it's like, especially with getting our moons the same time as this full moon, it was like all of this debris and this kind of crap wanted to like rise up out of us. And it was so, speaking for myself, it was so ugly. It pulled out some of my oldest, deepest, darkest shadows and insecurities, and
to be quite honest, like self-hatred stuff. And it was like every little thing that was going on during these weeks just made me look at myself in like pure disgust, which is a feeling that I'd been very, very familiar with in my life. And then to have it all rush through me in one of the mushroom ceremonies the week before the full moon was very, very, very intense. And then the mushroom ceremony on the full moon like allowed it to like come up and clear it away. And then when we were able to like come back together and talk through what had been happening over the last couple of weeks with you, with me, and everything, it was like, it was just as if we're both experiencing this same like shift in reality and in our bodies and in our like psyche, and specifically like about boundaries and in our relationships and like ultimately our self-worth stuff. And so to be able to like have these conversations and process them verbally and have somebody who's sitting there and is with me and understands and can see the bigger picture of it all, which is this collective female pain body and the way that we've just been so hurt by men and how we hurt ourselves to please men. You know, we kind of abandon ourselves in that way a lot of the times. It's been a wild journey. Yeah,
it has. And I think those self-betrayals, I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but those like self-betrayals, at least for me, are the ones that hurt the most. Like, I don't spend too much time in medicine ceremonies focusing on when people have betrayed me. I've spent way more time focusing on the times when I've betrayed myself. And it's not me focusing on it. It's just like being brought into my awareness as like, these are some of your deepest wounds. And it hurts. It really hurts to have to look at these shadows and these parts of yourself that are like, oh, I really, like, I say and I act, like, I respect myself, but in a lot of these moments, I don't actually act like that. Like, I'm not acting like that at all. And that really hurts me because I do love myself, because I do care about myself.
Yeah.
And I do care about women. So it's like all of these acts of betrayal for myself are not just betraying myself, but they're also betraying women. It's like faking orgasms. It's like, that's a fucking betrayal to females, like everywhere. Like, it's not just a deep betrayal of yourself. It's like one for all people. So, I mean, that's just a sexual example, but like, it's little things like that where I'm like, oof, that is painful, because by not standing up for me, I'm not only saying to myself, you're not worthy of love and attention and all this stuff, but like, also women aren't.
Yeah. Like
that's painful.
And for the orgasm part, like, also, I think it even goes a level deeper, because it's already like the man that you choose and I'm not putting it on the man. It's like, it's a co-creation of an orgasm, but like the man that you choose who's unable to like meet you in the space where you can have an orgasm, like, that is already a subconscious like precursor to the betrayal. Don't you think?
Yes, 100%. And at least speaking for my own wounds, and I know probably a lot of women have this, but it's like, a big one for me is being vulnerable. So like, can I actually allow myself to be seen by a man like that? I mean, as I'm sitting here now, I'm like, yeah, but like my entire life, no. Like, my entire life previously, and Paige and I were just talking about this too, but it's this weird thing I have now where I'm like, I know I'm not perfect, but I also know what I will not be settling for. Like, it's not even a question in my mind of like what I deserve and what I'm worthy of. So it's like, that to me is a new place where I'm standing from after all these years of being single and being like, no, I actually trust myself enough that like I can trust myself to be vulnerable with the right person, and B, like, pick the right person and pick someone who is deserving of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as like, it's hard to get there, but because, you know, if you spend a lifetime kind of picking or like basically being attracted to these men who ultimately, you know, either are, you know, emotionally unavailable or just literally will never be able to meet you in that level of intimacy, because they don't have it within themselves. And there's a part of you that recognizes that. And so it's kind of a safe place to go. Mm-hmm. It's safe to choose the unavailable guy because you'll never be able to meet each other emotionally. And then there's no huge risk in that, because even if they reject you, they haven't really rejected the real you, because they weren't even able to see the real you. Totally. And you weren't able to show them. But I was going to say, so a lifetime of that, it is difficult to kind of train yourself to be attracted to somebody who's like really going to be able to like fully see you and appreciate you and love you for the like whole complexity of who you are as a human. But I also do think it's a similar thing with the fake it till you make it, where it ultimately comes with just a decision, just deciding that you are worth that. And these men who might we have 2 cats, by the way.
The cat just made an appearance.
Medicine cats. But yeah, the man who's gonna, pick you up and put you down and pick you up and put you down and choose you this week but not that week, or just kind of have this messy thing with you. It's like, sit in that for a second and then think about what the opposite of that would be, and what feels better. Like the idea that a man is gonna come, and the man comes because you become this woman too, so it's not all on just the Disney princess waiting for the man, of course, but a man who's really going to choose you and to love your pleasure and the vulnerability that's in that pleasure, and be very dedicated and committed to meeting you in that vulnerability and that intimacy. That's right. The other stuff is all just bullshit. And it's it's just very immature, I think peeling back these layers of who we are as women is allowing the woman inside of us to really come forward and leave all that stuff in the past. That's at least what this process has felt like, where it's just stripping these child, teenage fears, teenage style relationships, young adult style relationships, and just say, okay, I've grown past that. I've evolved past that.
Yes. And what you're talking about reminds me of that quote, "We accept the love we think we deserve." Oh, yeah. That's another one that was really painful for me, because when you're looking at past relationships and how you were not treated as you think you might be cognitively thinking oh, I know I deserve better, but your actions are saying different. Your actions are saying, no, you actually think that's what you deserve. Yeah. And that's what you're taking. Yeah. And that's another self-betrayal, because it's I can say I think I deserve better, but if I'm actually with a guy who, it's well, then you don't actually believe that. You don't believe you deserve better, because if you just believed that, then you wouldn't be with him. Yeah. So that's the whole thing. Bless you.
That one hit.
Bless you. That's a good one. Oh, and I wanted to talk about something I heard on this podcast the other day that was a really quick one, but she was saying that as she watches women specifically go through these stages of kind of healing themselves or doing work on themselves or whatever you want to call it, there's some common stages. The first one is you have to get right in your body. So you have to treat your body well, be healthy, make healthy choices, just generally respect your body, treat your body like a temple, Step one, love your body. Step 2, say no. And that was, when I was hearing this podcast, even though she just briefly touched on it, I was like, oh, yes, that's it. My whole life I've been not saying no to certain things. Oh,
finding a second sneeze.
But it's the no, I feel especially as women, there might be a lot of stuff. Oh, the year of yes, it's so good to say yes to all these things. And while that might be true, what has to come first is the no's, because that is, you could call it boundaries, you could call it respecting yourself, you could call it whatever you want, but ultimately what it sounds like is no. And I can tell you're really fighting off sneeze.
I don't know what's going on. I think this is me being giving you my snaps. I'm yes, achoo,
bitch. I'll take a sneeze for that. But yeah, it's the no is really what I've been I've been standing in that without having a label for it, but it's like what I've been doing recently is a lot of knowing, a lot of no, a lot of like, and of course not in a mean way, but in a compassionate way that shows compassion to me, to myself, and to my own boundaries. That's like, I'm going to say no to all this shit that's not ultimately loving. Because, again, of step one, because I love this body, I love this avatar that I'm in, because I've created it, because I've treated it well, because of all the work I've done. So the next step is choosing, just saying no to everything that's not serving me. And that's been huge, because I feel like, again, I think, at least from what I've been taught a lot in my life, it's say yes. Like, yes, 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 yes is the magical word. Yes is, it's like, especially for women, try saying no. Yeah. Try saying no. And then step 3, you can start to say yes again. Yeah. So I really felt that so strongly and I know there's more steps she talked about, but those were the ones that really hit home with me, because I'm like, oh yes, I'm in the no phase, and that the no's helping me understand what my yeses are. Because if I didn't have this phase of no, then I would just be lost in the yeses. But it's like now I can really be clear on what do I want to say yes to, and it's not many things, quite frankly. Like, because the weird thing that happens is you start to love yourself and your time and the way that you're spending it so much that whatever comes into your life as an invitation, like, needs to be fucking better than that. Yeah. For you to want to say yes to it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It's kind of just like another way to know yourself on such a deeper level. Like, the no is plugging up those energy leaks, and the yes is discovering, like, what feels right for me and how deeply can I listen to what feels good. And I think the more you do that, the easier it is to like understand who you are and where you are and what your yeses are. And then I love the first one so much because we just absolutely live in our heads. And I think one thing for me that I've really discovered is that you can't like fight that's like a mental problem or like a subconscious issue with thinking. It's not going to solve your way out of the problem. So for me, the best way to blow right past that is to get into the body and to get into like your physical power and move that energy and move that life force. And there's like a million different ways to do that. But then it's like, once you build that resilience and that strength in your body, it's your body is your subconscious mind. So like getting that strength in the physical body is actually building such an incredible reservoir of capacity, of mental capacity and mental resilience. So yeah, I absolutely love that. And then once you like are able to develop that capacity a little bit more, you're able to say no. Mm-hmm. Like, you've got this strength in you now where the no's, where they once maybe were nowhere to be found, like all of a sudden you kind of go, oh, okay, you know what? No, I don't like to be treated that way. So I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to talk to that person, or whatever the no looks like, but, and then the yes, which is then like, who are you? Where are you? Like, starting to like rebuild yourself, from that ground up. I love that so much.
Me too. It just feels so true. Yeah. I'm like, I guess it's she's seen that in so many people for a reason. Yeah. And I'm sure it happens with men too, because most of us could really use some time living in our bodies instead of our minds. Yeah. It's just like, that's really it. All this stuff I'm learning about women's empowerment, all this plant medicine stuff, it's like, yes, that's a lot of work, but a lot of it boils down to the body, and a lot of it boils down to like moving the body and like trusting the body. And that can be like trusting your gut, trusting your heart, listening to like when you're fucking hungry. Like, just such simple things. It's like Women, Food, and God, that book, where it's like, hey, why don't you just try eating when you're hungry and not eating when you're not hungry? And we're like, what? That's so
it's a mind-blowing concept for the ages. It's really... God almighty.
It's crazy, but it applies to everything. Yeah. And the fact that you can say no and mean it and stand by it, even if it's like these little tiny decisions that you don't think are adding up, it's like that is what has been building my empowerment, is like looking back at the last couple of years. It's like the times when I didn't say no, damn, did I feel that in my body? And I felt so much shame and disgust and guilt and like anger about it. But that's kind of cool, because it's like, that's how in tune I am with my body. And like when that doesn't happen, I'm like, my whole body reacts and like wants to fight back and be like, why didn't you fucking stand up for yourself? Like anger is boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's like all of these things are helping me learn. But I always have to like just say I'm obviously not perfect. I'm still working on a lot of this stuff. There's still many times where I'm like kowtowing to people or trying to be someone for someone because I think they need it, but really that's like betraying myself. So all these like subtleties are still there, but I think that's why last night when we were like we're in the know.
We are so in the know, baby. Oh my God, the know. What a turn on.
Like we're in the know. Just like no. Like even just saying it out loud is like something about it. It's like I feel like a lot of women, especially the ones that I've worked with at healing centers, like they were put in positions, especially as kids or anything, even as adults, but like when they weren't able to say no, or they tried to say no and were silenced, or they literally couldn't say no, or it's just like this energy of like you can't fight back, you're so oppressed. And so to be able to be an adult woman and speak your no is like, ooh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite literally nothing more powerful than that, I think. Also because these women who have gone through these horrible things, and it lives in their bodies. And so getting in touch with our bodies and our energy centers and understanding like where something like that might live. And then once you know where that might live, it's like you do have the ability to transmute it. And then it's like in that transmuting, that power, that no starts to rise up, because our bodies will scream at us. They will send us such crazy signals. And I mean, I know we were recently talking about there's a really big correlation between, women who have had sexual trauma in their life and women who experience, PCOS, endometriosis and things like that. And it's like, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Like that center, that sacral chakra, that center of creativity, of sexuality, of safety, of an initiation. And it's like, if that is so torn up and so like, what's the word? Like,
abused? I don't know.
Like atrophied, basically, because it's been told, it's been self-abandoned and self-abused and betrayed by loved ones or whatever it is. It's like it almost like it atrophies in there, and so that ability to take that power center and say no has been like fully removed. And so then to turn to plant medicine, like you've seen a lot of these women do. And it's like that no starts to slowly seep back into their bodies, and you can watch them regain their power. And like a lot of times these women will then go on to do a lot of work, with the sacral center, with sexuality or whatever it is, and be able to like transmute that pain, so that they can live in their no. It's like just knowing that's an absolute possibility, and also will make that center that much stronger because of what it's already been through. Like there's so much there to work with.
There's so much there. Like that's where so much of our power lives. Yeah. I mean, I know I did a whole episode called Pussy Power, but it's like that's where our power lives. So it makes sense that if you feel like you've had your power to kind of taken from you, that's how it will feel. And that's where like another interesting correlation that I've been thinking about is like when women have stuff like bacterial vaginosis or like a really funky odor or like UTIs that they get from the same partner over and over again. It's like maybe consider that's your body saying that's not the right person, or like just sometimes it's that fucking obvious. Like if you're so disconnected from your body that you don't even know it's saying no, like it will, like you said, it will be loud. It will be like, hey, pay attention down here. Like this ain't good. And I remember like I think Carly and I were talking to like one of our friends' moms, and she said just something totally offhanded like, oh yeah, I smelled this like crazy bad smell one time after these two people were having sex. And that's like the smell when it's like not like two people are incompatible down there. Oh. And I was like, whoa.
Wait, she was like in the room.
I can't even remember how this came up.
Like, she's smelling it from next door.
I literally don't remember, like, why this came. It was probably because we were talking about, like, something like what we're talking about now. But she was like, oh, it's this crazy thing that happens with, like, it's basically, like, a weird chemical reaction of your body's being like, no. Yeah. And people just will do anything to avoid that no. Like, I did so much to avoid that kind of no, where it's like, oh, but what about, you know...
No, my ears are clogged if there's... or my nose is clogged, whichever one. I'm not going to hear it or smell it.
No,
like,
it's like the monkeys, like, see, nope, can't see it. But I feel like ultimately your body... the body keeps the score. But, like, seriously, it's like...
It does.
All of our trauma's literally in our body. And, again, not just our trauma, but a lot of the collective trauma. There's just always stuff we can be moving and clearing. So it's like, if you start with the body... There's no better place to start, really. Like, that's it. Start with your body. Listening to it, treating it well. Like, I know this is so random and really obvious, but maybe it's not to some people. It's like, I've started to just, even when I wake up, I just put my hand on my heart or my stomach and be like, what do we want to do right now? You know, are you hungry? Do we want to move? Like, just really tapping into what my body wants before I just start moving out of autopilot. And it's like, even today, I was like, what do I want to eat? Like, I asked my body and allowed it to be like, do we want yogurt? Do we want oatmeal? Like, it seems so simple, but it's like these like little things where I'm basically teaching and creating a relationship with my body where I'm like, I trust you. Like, I trust you. I'm listening. Yeah. What do you want from me? Yeah. Because I'm like in devotion to my own body. Mm-hmm. Like, not all the time, but like I'm trying. I'm doing it. I'm moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's really beautiful because I think when you start to like really slow down and be present and listen to your body, it actually strengthens so much of that like the intuitive connection that you have with yourself, right? And it builds that relationship up, and then you just have access to it in a much easier way. So when it comes time for like more difficult or complex situations, you know, someone comes into your life and you're not sure. I think even the fact that you're not sure, then you're going to kind of sit, you know, even quieter and say, you know, what's going on here? What is this bringing up in me? And then, you know, you get an answer and you go from there. But ultimately, again, that's like looking out for yourself in a way that's so much deeper than just kind of passing by the day-to-day stuff without questioning it. Like developing that inherent connection with your physical self. It's just it goes along with mind, body, spirit.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, this is turning into like such a women's podcast, but whatever, I love it. It's like, it reminds me of also how we are so attuned to a man's world, which is like a 24-hour clock, versus our menstrual cycle, which is like a lunar cycle, same amount of time. So it's like, I think that's been another really big part of what's been helping me be so in tune with my body. For example, the week before my period, it's like, oh, I didn't even know what these phases were called, honestly. Like, a couple of years ago, I had no fucking idea. But now I'm like, oh, I know what they're called. I know what activities I need to be doing at which parts of the month. Like, I know, and apps have helped me with this too, but it's like, I know when I'm going to be grumpy. I know when I'm going to be really high energy and, like, really loving. And I know when I'm going to need to, like, literally be a couch potato and not feel bad about it. And that has really drastically changed how I live and how I'm, like, living in my body also, because I'm not forcing myself to do like high intensity interval training like day 2 of my period. Yeah. So whereas before I was again totally living by the man's world rules, which is like you get 7 hours of sleep, you go up, you run on the treadmill, like no matter how you're feeling, you just fucking do it. It's well, are you bleeding?
Rub some dirt in it.
Yeah. Are you literally gushing blood from between your legs? Yeah. Like, do you have cramp? Like, how would you know that that's what my body needs? Yeah. It's like, again, outsourcing our power to be like, oh, okay, these men know what we should be doing, as opposed to like, hey, maybe my body fucking knows.
Yep. And then the other thing that's very cool about understanding our cycles, too, is like, if we're in the follicular phase of our cycle, which is these cats, which is the phase where we're supposed to, you know, have a ton of energy, be looking fire. And so if I'm in my follicular phase, but I like don't want to get out of bed, then that's also something to look at too, because energetically speaking and you know, going by my cycle, I should be having a wellspring of energy, but so maybe there's something else going on there, and maybe it's emotional, or maybe, you know, I just need to make a tea infusion that will kind of help move something along in my lymphatic system, or, you know, whatever it is. But yeah, it's like any relationship, really. Like, I think these sister relationships, these romantic relationships, and this relationship with ourselves and with our bodies, it's like it requires real nurturing and real tenderness and real just like presence, and just quality of presence as well, as like an offering, but as a way to like develop the relationship further. And just like in sisterhood and just like in romantic relationships, that can be really awkward and uncomfortable. Like, it's, I mean, for me, I still struggle with this from time to time, just like spending time alone with myself. I mean, even if it's something just like going for a walk without headphones or whatever, I still have moments where I'm kind of like, oh, I would rather be listening to this or doing that or da-da-da-da. And sometimes it takes me a while to like sink into it. If I haven't done it for a while, you know, outside of meditation in the mornings, and it's like the first 5 minutes of just like really spending time alone, sometimes I'm like, and I can feel myself like itching for, do I call somebody? Do I do this? Do I do that? And it takes me a moment to like drop into it, because I have to then be present with like, well, why am I feeling antsy about that? Or like, what is it? And it's like, I think for me, I have to really calm myself down in order to be in that, like, in this beautiful space of presence with myself. But otherwise, if I don't do that, it's like, I'm not, even when I'm just totally alone, it's like, I'm still kind of running, you know, this mental loop, and I'm not actually like fully in my body or fully letting myself sink into this time spent alone, which is like, for me, one of the most important things in my whole life is to just spend some time by myself. And it doesn't have to be a ton of time either, but like, was always so difficult for me in most of my life, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. Just time spent alone, you know, people avoid it at all costs, whether they recognize that they do it or not. But just to have time, just one-on-one with you and your own voice, and not have other input or external people coming in. And I think, again, it's like that is the same thing as your relationship with your body, with yourself, your relationship with, you know, your family, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your closest friends. Like, it's like the same level of presence. If you want a real honest and kind of conscious, like mirrored relationship in those ways, it does require that level of presence. That's not always just gonna come. It's like sometimes you have to really let yourself sink into it and see then, you know, how it turns out. Yeah.
That was really beautifully said, because I feel like, I mean, that's something I still deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it's like, I, again, have kind of trained myself to know we just have to get through these first few crunchy moments of like, it's pretty much always tough. I mean, I do have some beautiful days where I'm just like,
it's easier. You know? Some days it's easier.
Some days it's easier. But that's not the norm, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, that's not my baseline. My baseline is like totally insane monkey mind from the moment I wake up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have to do a lot of practices to like, okay, one of my favorite meditation tapes, he even talks about, he's like, and, the cats, okay, the cats are really...
Sorry, I could have stopped that, but I didn't realize that was gonna...
The cats, just quick side story, we like adopted these 2 cats, but it's kind of a long story, but anyway, we have 2 cats here, and they are adorable, but also going totally stir crazy. We're not letting them out of the house quite yet. They've got to get used to us and the space, but they keep attacking each other.
Out of nowhere, like just for fun, it seems like.
And they're siblings. They've been together for years, so it's not like we just put 2 random cats together. But anyway, they're really freaking
they're
cute. They're
special cats,
They're special. They're just a little bit cray-cray, a little bit uneasy right now. But they're so cute.
They're so cute. But
yeah, I just, like, I don't know if I will ever be without that, and that's okay with me too. It's like just understanding that I'm gonna have this strong resistance my mind's going to always come in and have this strong resistance because the ego doesn't like to be observed.
Yeah.
So it's just like this weird process where I'm like, there's my higher self sitting down to do these practices that knows it'll make me feel better. And then there's my ego who's so fucking loud and very strong from the moment I wake up. So it's like, okay, we're going to like, I've told people at Dream Glade there'd be this funny thing where I'd hear this voice in my head as I get out of bed after I practice my meditation that's like, maybe we don't have to do yoga today, as my body's like unrolling the yoga mat. And then I'm like, well, maybe we can just do 5 minutes, and then I'm doing the practice. So it's like I have this voice in my head, but I'm not letting it dictate what my body's doing. It's like this weird like disconnect where I'm like, okay, I hear what's going on in my mind, but I'm not going to let that stop my body from like doing what it wants to do. It's really bizarre.
No, but that's awesome because that's like a trained muscle.
Yeah,
it is. That's not easy because I think especially in the morning times, it's so difficult to separate the fact that is a thought and that's not just like objective reality that like, no, today that's a no for today. That's not the way we're using our nose necessarily, but yeah, I mean, it is. So like kudos for like, you should pat yourself on the back anytime you have a win like that, I think, because that is the whole concept and philosophy and purpose behind meditation or these practices is to like have that space between those thoughts and your actions and understanding that you are the observer of the thoughts and you are not the thoughts themselves.
Yes. And to feel like that's enough. Because I think last year, I like to have a word of focus every year instead of like New Year's resolutions, but last year my word was discipline/devotion, because I started with discipline and I was like, well, that doesn't sound fun. That sounds like it sucks. So I chose devotion because it's basically the same thing, but just like prettier and feels better. Yeah. So it's funny though, because the whole year went by and I just like truly didn't feel like I quote unquote got there. I was like, I still don't feel like I'm totally in devotion to like myself and to God and to things like that. But I think I said that in a moment of vulnerability to someone, like a guest, and they were like, you seem super disciplined to me. And I was like, oh, really? I mean, it's just, sometimes we don't pause and take stock of like how we've actually been doing. And especially as our Virgo queenness, it's like so fucking critical that I don't allow myself to ever be like, oh, maybe that's enough. Like, oh, maybe that was enough. Like, 100%. That thought doesn't cross my mind of like, it was ever enough. Yeah. It's like, it's never enough. That was the...
Guys, come on.
Can you be nice? We're recording here.
Do you just want the pillow? Is that what that is?
Here, you guys can have another pillow.
This isn't a
Hold on, I'm going to pause this podcast. Okay, we are back. Sorry for that cat interruption. So I think I was talking about the not enough thing, and Carly, my sister... was doing these yoga classes from this woman and just had this really good motto. I think at the end of most of her classes, she would say, let that be enough. And my sister, like, loved that because for her, she struggles with the same thing we're talking about, which is, like, not... I honestly didn't think I really had that problem, quote-unquote, but I totally do. Like, it's definitely, like, even looking back at my resolution, I have this feeling of it's never enough. It was never enough. I'm never enough. That whole thing. But I think I've again slowly started to heal that wound of just trying to put the thought in my head like, that was enough. That's enough for today. That's enough for like, again, the fact that if you go for a walk and you can only make it 5 minutes without putting in your headphones or calling someone, it's like, okay, that's enough. Just like let it be enough. And it is enough. You don't have to be like this crazy healing machine robot. Like, let it be enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that sometimes, the not enough thing can be so extremely exhausting, but also I think it comes from a very old school mindset. But I also think, as you were talking, I was just feeling into your like mission in this world and your purpose in this world. And it's like maybe what you're doing is not enough for, I don't know, to be like a pilot in the Air Force or to be like this very capitalistic type person or to be a supermodel or to be like whatever, some crazy stuff that, we were given this responsibility, I think, as kids growing up in this very capitalistic society of like, you have to always be productive, you have to get the best grades, you have to get into like all of these things. It's like, have to. And it was going to be hard work to get there and to accomplish all that stuff. And we were like constantly reminded of that. But, you know, as we've gone through our lives and found our calling and our mission and understand what that is, it's like we still have that so like deeply ingrained in us that it's like that same capitalistic productivity monster like still lives in us, even though our purpose and our values have shifted like so dramatically. And so it's kind of aligning those two and recognizing, no, what we're doing in our day-to-day and like in the general collective mission that we're on is so enough.
Yeah.
What's not enough is like that I still think that I'm supposed to be like living in that like productivity monster world, and I'm not living there anymore. So I think we have to constantly like remind ourselves, remind our bodies like it is enough. That other world like does not exist, and it's just like a distant memory that like still lives in me when my alarm goes off at 7 a.m. for no real reason. But it's like, yeah.
And it's so funny because I've talked so many people through this exact same thing in ceremony where it's truly comical, where people will have just drinking ayahuasca or wachuma or whatever it is. And even recently on mushrooms where you see it and people like don't know what to do. Yeah. They're like, what am I supposed to be doing? Yes. What do I do? And I'm like, just do nothing. And they literally cannot fathom that they came all the way, you know, down to the jungle, to the mountains, or to do this ceremony. And what the medicine is showing them is to be present with whatever's there. And like, they don't think that's enough. Because they're like, well, I feel like I should be doing something. I should be moving. Especially with wachuma, I see this a lot where people are like, what am I supposed to be doing? I want to do something. It's like, well, just try not doing.
Yep.
And that's where, like, it reminds me of that quote, too. It's like, if you don't have 15 minutes to meditate, then you need to meditate for 30 minutes.
Yes.
Because people think that it's going to make them so much less productive, but really it will, like, double your production because you'll get clear on, like, well, what am I doing here?
Right.
Like, what is coming up? Yeah. What is my body? It's just, like, this funny thing where I see it in other people really clearly, but when it's happening for myself, it's like, oh, right, that's that productivity monster is still there. For sure.
I had that one time at Dream Blade. I don't remember any other context of the specific ceremony, to be totally honest, but I remember getting up, I went to the bathroom, and I remember being in the bathroom and like having this whole thought process of like, okay, so I'm going to go back into the ceremony space, and and I was like, what am I, and I was like, oh, right, I'm just going to do nothing. Just like, there's like, I was like thinking like, okay, I gotta get up, gotta go back, and then it's like, and then nothing. Then you have nothing to do. There's literally, it was like a very kind of funny moment where I was like, remembering like, okay, so what was my to-do list again? Like a very common thought of like, what was I?
What was I doing? Yeah. Oh, right, nothing.
Yeah.
Like literally just sitting and surrendering.
Yeah.
That's the thing on my to-do list. It's so difficult. It can be the hardest one on your to-do list.
But it's also such a gigantic relief.
Oh,
yeah.
Totally.
And it's funny. It is just funny. It's like that funny moment of laughing like, wow, am I always like that?
Yes. You know? It's like bringing this clarity to how you always
constantly are operating.
Yes. Yes.
And again, a lot of that is because we just don't want to be alone with ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, I think most humans have that issue, especially in our world, in our Western capitalistic world, where, like you said, as you're talking, I'm like, holy shit, the level of programming since we were very young. It's not a joke. I mean, it is in like comedy movies where people are like, oh, you have to get this kid into the best preschool because then they have to be in the best kindergarten because then it's like...
But that's life, actually. Like it's in comedy movies, sure, but it's also like, that's what's so crazy about that is that's actually happening.
And when does it stop? Because we pulled ourselves out with all of our effort and might and force, like removed ourselves from this sticky capitalistic situation. So it's like, and then people are like, wait, what? What are you guys doing? What are you going to do? What are you going to do next month? Where are you going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. And that answer is like so uncomfortable for, I loved Jan's answer. She's like, if people ask you this stuff and you're bothered by it, just say like, oh, fuck, what was her word? She said something like, it's inconsequential or something. Like, it's just, it like, basically just doesn't matter. It's trivial. Like, it's just... Because
the thing is, it is. I remember when I first moved here a little over a year ago, and I moved basically straight from fucking Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I would have these moments, which again, it was like so ridiculous, it was almost funny, because I would have these moments. I'd be sitting outside this little place that I rented when I first got down here, and I was still working remotely here and there and stuff, but I'd be sitting outside and I would have like these moments of grabbing my chest and just being like, okay, what am I doing? Okay, because it'd be like the middle of the day on a Tuesday, and I'm in this absolutely gorgeous place. I don't really have that much quote unquote to do, and I felt so incredibly far away, which of course I was, from New York, from my old life, and I would like have these moments where I would have to like hold on to my own body and be like, okay, you're okay. You are okay. Like I felt like I was gonna just disappear into fairy dust because I wasn't still connected to the machine, and it happened for like a few weeks. I was just like, wow, this is gonna take me a while to like decompress from 7 years of living in the belly of the beast, and I mean it did. It's probably less time than I thought, but that was happening, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm still alive. I'm still here. My body has not like vanished. I am still a human and on the ground. It's okay. And I know it was ridiculous, but like also that's very fucking real. Like
it's true.
Yeah.
I remember living at Dreamglade and in the ayahuasca center I worked at, and like feeling so fucking relaxed 99% of the time. And when new guests would come in, it was like the phrase, you can smell the city on them, because it was literally this crazy energy where they'd be like, okay, what do we do? Where do I go? Where do I put my bags? Like, where's the bathroom? And it's just like so like that. And you could feel, I mean, it's crazy because you could feel that energy and you're like, whew, you just want to be like, can we just sit and take 3 deep breaths together? Your nervous system is like
shot. Totally shot.
It's like, have you ever taken a moment to just like maybe not plan the next 5 hours of your day? Just like that to them is just so mind-boggling. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most healing things about coming down here has been recognizing how completely shot my nervous system was. Because the thing is, you can live in New York and you can do these practices and you can kind of figure out your way around it. But like ultimately, I think, and I really feel like this for most people living in the city, and when I say most, I mean everybody, which is that you don't really stand a chance to not have a completely dysregulated nervous system, because how many people are actually putting their feet on the ground in New York City
like
every
barefoot
day or multiple times a day to like discharge a lot of those insane energies. Or just the fact that you're constantly around such extreme stimuli. That's entire millions of people who you're constantly around all the time. But a million other things as well, right? And so to expect that you'd be able to have a true sense of calm and presence that was like foundational, like in your nervous system, it's I don't know if you can really ever expect that, and so coming here, one of the big lessons Wachuma gave me was like, again, there is nothing to do, and like basically it was like, chill, bitch. Like it was in that way too, where it was like, just
I'm picturing a cactus with like glasses on with like a spliff, just like, chill, motherfucker.
It keeps, that's like, honestly, Wachuma is my boy, but like that is the main message it continues to drill into me, where it's like, just stop. Like, just stop. Like, just stop taking everything so seriously. Stop. Just chill, bitch.
Chill, bitch.
Yeah.
I really love that. I could use that as a mantra. I mean, I'm pretty fucking chill these days, but even though Again, I've heard this is a Virgo thing, but even though I can appear very chill from the outside, like my internal landscape needs to be constantly like watered and cared for, and be like, just chill. Like that's like the whole vibe of me is like me, my higher self versus my ego. My higher self's always being like, just chill. Like you don't have to prove your worth. You are inherently worthy, and you don't have to like prove to anyone or anything that you deserve to be on this planet. Like So that's, I mean, the amount of programming though, especially for, it's like, I read something on Instagram that was like, oh, if you were considered like a gifted student, like how's your perfectionistic ADHD tendencies going? And also like, how's your spiritual breakthrough going? I'm like, oh my God, this is...
And you're an older sister on top of that. So like, I feel like that's the third one, right? So,
yes. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I haven't thought about that one too, but it's a lot. So it's funny because being in touch with everyone in, for lack of a better word, the Matrix, and living down here in like rustic ass Peru, it's like I love this simple life. Like I'm thriving in it. And yet sometimes when I talk to people back home, even like my dad, shout out to my dad, I love you so much, but even when he asks me certain questions like, where are you going to be? And well, are you going to be in Peru in September? And I'm like, I genuinely don't know, which for me feels great.
Yes.
Like I truly love that because I'm like, ooh, it's exciting. It's new. I don't know where I'm going to be in September. But to him, it does give me this tiny little like, is that a problem? Like, are we going to be okay?
Right.
Like, what's your plan? Where's your 5-year goal? Like, where's your gifted student? What's she doing? Is she putting that degree to work? It's like, I literally don't think about that most days, but of course it's ingrained in us.
It's ingrained. I mean, that's the ego. It's like totally the ego. It's that sense of control. I mean, I think probably more people than not would have a really, if you told them right now that their life was going to change in some way and we couldn't tell them where they'd be in September, they would lose their minds. You know, I mean, everything that they thought would just go up in the air. But I think that's also part of that control mechanism of the ego, where it's like we're holding on for dear life onto these things that we think give us safety and stability and security, and it's all really an illusion. And I feel like we've probably talked about this on here before, but like it's just funny because I think most things circle back to that, right?
Yes.
So like, okay, that's one example of like the dad, the daughter doesn't know where she's going to be in a few months, and the dad is kind of like, okay, well, I'm not sure what to do with that. You know, it's like that. It just all stems back to letting go of control.
Yes.
I mean, even us
surrender,
running around and doing all of these non-consequential things that we think are so important. It's like, that's the ego trying to think they have some form of control over what's going to happen. And
and I can hear people thinking this when they hear us talking about this stuff. I can hear people thinking like, but I'm so scared. Like, what if I'm not wanting to be productive and I'm not wanting to like do all these things, then like I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit there and do absolutely nothing and not be a contributing member to society. And I'm like, that's bullshit. That's complete bullshit because of kind of what we talked about earlier, which is the more that I allow myself to sit with myself, get to know my body, blah, 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 all these like things, the more truly productive I am, because it's like, I'm actually very much aligned with what I want to be doing and like prioritizing my day. And before, when I was quote unquote super productive on Vivant and like working corporate, it's what was I fucking doing again?
No, you're like, running around,
like a chicken with its head cut off. It's like, where were you going? Like you were just running fast, but you weren't actually going anywhere.
No,
you were
it's
just
like one of those little things with the battery, and you throw it and it just runs in circles.
And you're just like, I'm making money so that I can spend money, and I'm just making. And I love Stace because he was like, you have to think about this, like, as a human, did you come down here to spend money? Like, is that why you came down?
Give that a second. Is that why you came down?
Like, did you come down here to spend money?
Yeah. I love that.
Because if not, that's like literally what we're doing. Yeah. So anyway.
But so also, though, like physiologically and energetically, if you actually do give yourself that true time to like really rest, or just be with yourself. And I'm not talking about like binging Netflix or anything like that. No hate or anything, but just
we do it too.
But real rest, like real physiological, energetic rest, is like resting, like maybe some light reading or whatever, but ultimately just like really letting yourself rest. And I know that sounds so terrifying and scary to people, just like be alone and rest. But if you do that, what you're doing is you're filling back up your like true, genuine reservoirs of energy, right? Instead of having coffee in the morning or whatever it is, Red Bull, all these things that are basically pulling from this like false, like fake energy or imitate energy, because that's what it does. Because it depletes your adrenals, and it just like makes you crash, and it like fries your nervous system and all this stuff, and it's actually not genuine, like real authentic energy that your body's actually stored up. It's like, it's kind of stealing borrowed energy in a way. So if you are able to like give yourself that true rest, you'll be absolutely floored and shocked at how your nervous system changes, the energy that you have, your sleep patterns change, the way that you're able to like wake up, probably your mood in the morning, your hormonal changes. Like if you really like, sleep is one of the most important things when it comes to like foundational wellness. And it's like the simplest stuff, right? But like sleep might be the most important one. So if you're able to like just, and when I say sleep, I mean sleep and rest. But if you're able to just like give yourself the
We're
grace,
being sleep and resters.
Yeah, right now. Oh, also this comes at a perfect time though, because I was just telling Brittany, like, so we're literally 3 weeks away from the spring. Well, okay, so we're in the southern hemisphere, so for us it's the fall equinox, but for probably most people listening, it's the spring equinox. March 20th or 21st. Check your calendars, watch the space. But it's coming, right? So right now it's like we're at the tail end of winter, and so what's been coming up for me and Brittany a lot is this like cocooning, this like deep rest. And it can feel uncomfortable, but also when we understand how to like work with the natural cycles and the natural rhythms of the earth and recognize that we're in the last phases of winter, like now is the time to finish that just deep rest. Because when we give ourselves that grace, then guess what happens after spring equinox? It's like everything comes back to life. The energy of the planet rejuvenates itself again, and slowly we start to bloom and seed and saplings, and all of that amazing life force just like comes like a force out of the ground. And so it's like there's a part of us, because we're being so sensitive to these cycles now, that's like very aware that that's the case. And so we have 3 weeks now to just be by ourselves and rest. I mean, it even feels good to just like say it out.
Just like cocoon.
Yeah, and just nothing.
And just like what we were talking about yesterday, it's like I still have this weird layer of resistance to that because of blah, 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 everything we've talked about. And it's so weird to fight against the urge not to rest, if that makes sense. It's like you're literally going against like nature. If you're like, no, but I don't want to rest, like it's just not productive enough. It's like you're really, really going against the natural system of things. But I just wanted to call that out and be like, hey, look, I still have some resistance around just the idea of like resting for 3 weeks. But it's like, it also, I don't have enough resistance to stop me from doing it because it feels so good. It's like, feels so right. I know I'm doing it. I'm in it. It feels really good, but I'm like, listen, if you have resistance to it, I hear you. I feel you. You can like, I don't want to say push through it because it's not a pushing through the resistance. It's more of a like relaxing into the rest and knowing that it's going to be fine. You're not going to just like dissolve. You're not going to just like disintegrate and rot away. Like you're going to be fine. Yeah. You just need some rest.
It's true. And I think also sometimes what happens is it's almost like forced rest, like something that I have experienced in the past. I think especially with like moving down here and being more sensitive and aligned to like these natural cycles, is that I've gotten sick and I've gotten ill during times where I was really supposed to probably be resting and maybe wasn't. And then it's like this forced rest, which is even more uncomfortable than forcing it on yourself, like to actually have your body kind of force it on you. And then what happened, like personally for me, is that forced me into being aligned with these natural cycles. And then I can recognize that I no longer fear the thought of 3 weeks of being in a cocoon right now, because I know on the other end of that is like an abundance of energy and like yang energy, which is just like this external glow, physicality, fire, passion, readiness, firing on all cylinders. Like I'm very aware that that's what comes on the other side. and trusting that and knowing that allows for that rest to just be able to like sink into, you know.
That's so beautiful and also huge, because even as you were talking, I was like, my entire life, I've pretty much every vacation I've ever scheduled for myself that I can remember, that wasn't like, you know, my traveling here and there, but let's say I'm working and then I schedule a vacation, I'm sick. Like that happened almost every time I was like, okay, I'm finally on vacation and I get extremely ill. Or like, or I'd be back in my party days, which were a lot, but it would be like, that's the only time when I would literally rest is when I was like very, very sick. And that's not, okay, that's like ridiculous rest. That's like your body's actually like really in trouble. So for us to go from that to this, it's like preventative rest.
Yes, exactly. Which like in the US, we don't understand preventative care because it's all, you know, we use the allopathic model of medicine there. So there's no... Preventative medicine is not really, I mean, in some circles maybe, but generally in like Western medicine, it's not how they operate. But in every other, you know, older culture in the world, that's the only kind of medicine there is preventative medicine.
And we literally as a culture, society, don't understand that. I mean, how many times have we heard people say like, well, why would you do ayahuasca if you're healthy? It's like, well, why would you go to the gym if you're healthy? Why would you do yoga if you're... Like, come on. We're trying to keep ourselves healthy here. Like, we're trying to avoid getting sick. Like, that's what really our healthcare system... I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit
hole. I was going to say, I could take this and run with it. I could fly on these vectors. Yeah.
This is a vector we don't have to go down right now. Let me check the time. Okay, so we're at 1:30. I'm going to... end this episode here, and we're going to do part 2.
Okay, sweet.
So that, because I know I've gotten some feedback from people that it's like 2 hours is way too long, guys. So, okay, we're going to pick this back up and finish this episode out here. So, thank you so much, Paige.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, and we'll talk to you very soon. Sending you so much love. And rest vibes.
Definitely, deep rest for you all.
Deep rest.